Hey guys, in case you haven't heard, Zyori actually just came out with a new book called Surviving Esports.
I sure did. The Zyori Story.
The Zyori Story. And we have the privilege of sitting down with you and talking about the origins of the book, how you wrote it, the chaos and I'm sure stress that comes with writing a book.
It's like just over 300. Yeah, it took me a lot of hours, so I'm more than excited to talk about it.
Awesome. So I love to learn about the origins of things. So can you tell me a little bit about the origin of creating Surviving Esports and kind of how it came about?
Yeah, for sure. So it started as something I was doing basically just for fun. I started writing just to get the thoughts out of my head, and the more you write, the more real it starts to become. And eventually it started to feed itself, and I went to Slacks and said, hey, I've got like 100 pages here. Do you think this could actually be something worth finishing? And he gave me words of encouragement, and then that gave me the motivation to keep working at it. And once I had the first draft done, it felt like I was too far to give up, and then that cycle just continued to repeat. But for the most part, Talon and myself get the most common question, how do I work in esports like you? How do we become a caster? And I think those folks often get to see the best part of what we do because the product is often polished, we're on camera, we've got nice clothes on, clothes in general, makeup on, good lighting, all that kind of stuff. But there's a lot that happens behind the scenes to get to that point. Not only working your way up as talent, but just the politics involved of networking to get to events, and then being your best self on camera. So I wanted to share some of the stuff behind the scenes and shed some light on the stories that have never been told before.
And was there an inspiration around how you created the book? Because you kind of do it chronologically. You don't have little excerpts. Some people like to do like, oh, here's a little bit here, and here's a little excerpt from this event. You kind of did it in a chronological order, moving from when you started to kind of nearish the future.
Yeah. I talked to a lot of different people about how to structure it, and in my head, I always thought chronological just made the most sense because that's how I sort of see my own story, just in the progress of events happening. And I think it makes sense when you look at moving from contract to contract, game to game, company to company. It tells a story when you piece it all together. So it would have been cool to do like 10 kind of lessons or takeaways and then put different experiences organized that way, but I think it would have been a totally different book, and I think it would have lost some of the personal aspect of it.
Right.
So it just felt like that was my original vision, and it felt good when I wrote it out that way, and we just stuck to the original draft.
This is awesome. And when you were writing, you said that you kind of were just writing to start with, in the beginning, just notes, pages. What was the writing process like? Did you have to force yourself to sit down? Was it something that you did as a form of, not meditation, but stress relief?
Yeah, it's sort of both. There were moments when it was a source of stress, feeling like I'm behind or I want to have this schedule, and then new things kept popping up or new edits kept coming. I was really surprised when I finished the first draft. I had that feeling of, it's finally done, I have a full draft. Then I went back to read it and edit it, and I realized how awful the first draft was. And it felt like the second draft was the real first draft. You kind of use that rough draft and plagiarize it to come up with something that actually tells a story and isn't just a stream of thoughts, there was a point where it just felt like it was never going to be done. But at the same time, it's satisfying to have a project where you work on 0.5% of completion every day, and knowing those little bits add up over time. I played a lot of World of Warcraft, so that grind felt kind of good in a way to have something to come back to every single day. But it also felt like homework some days. I'm done my normal 8 hours. All right, now it's time to start writing. So I tried my best to force myself to at least write something every day, even if it was only for 20 minutes, 30 minutes, even if at the end of the day I said, this is garbage, I'm going to throw it away and start fresh. I just tried to force myself to get in the habit of writing every day.
And on the topic of throwing stuff away, you talked a little bit about the first draft being absolute garbage, and then second draft I started feeling better. What percentage did you lose or add as you went through the draft?
That's a good question. I kind of wish I had done like a word count. It seemed to keep growing. When I went back and read the first draft, it seemed like there were details that needed to be expanded. It felt like it was more a statement of events, like I was here, I did this person said that, and the second phase or draft was more weaving it all together and making it a story and not just being like a nonfiction of my account of things. So we definitely added to it throughout the way, and then those final passes when we started trimming things down. My worry was that it would be boring, so I wrote the first draft with like all the juice, and then the goal was to dial it back in future edits. So we did get to that point where we started removing bits and pieces here and there.
And speaking of the juicy bits, a lot of people don't consider esports to be maybe an industry or ecosystem that needs books. So what is the significance of writing an esports book in our current landscape?
It's definitely a different medium. Like, we're so used to doing everything live. That's been Moonduck's secret to success, is that with limited resources or limited prep time, we're really good at rolling with the punches and doing like the one take and having that one take feel like it was sort of rehearsed or we had a plan the whole time. This is the complete opposite. You put all this work in, nobody sees any of that work, and then when it's done, it's just out there and it's perfect, and that's it. It's just published and you don't touch it, and it just exists for the rest of time. A complete inversion of our normal process. So it was a nice challenge to do that. I think the medium of a book lets you tell a story in more like concrete detail than you can live. You know, live has this very sort of rushed feel, like we're doing the best that we can with all these moving pieces, and the book was, we have unlimited time to get the tone, get the story right. So it was a cool challenge, and there just aren't a lot of them. There aren't a lot of esports books, and I have a fairly unique story between the whole Sniff Sniff thing, some cyberbullying in there, and even just the time I worked at Beyond the Summit, we did a lot of really cool shit. You know, we created the summit while I was there, and so much work went into that no one ever saw. And I'm glad that somebody gets to finally tell that story and get some of that stuff out there.
Yeah, of course. And so obviously you want people to pick up the book, people to read it.
Yeah.
What do you want them to take away from the story? What do you want them to, you know, what parting message do you want them to leave with?
It's kind of two things. Number one is that esports is difficult, and it's an illusion to think that we're just out there smiling and having fun at all times. Like, you get to see really the best parts, and like I always fear a little bit when people say, "How do I have your job?" It's like, I don't even know if you want my job, because you're visualizing the part of the job that is genuinely fun and all the hard stuff that we don't show on camera. So I wanted to shed some light on that. And the second thing is that there is no clear path. Like, one thing that I've learned after talking to all of these different talent across all these different events is that everybody has their own path. Everybody has their own story, and there's no cookie cutter way to go from fan to someone working in esports. So my goal in telling this story was to show how complicated the path can be, and that for most of my journey, I didn't think that I was going to make it, and I feel lucky to be where I am now.
And so you consider yourself now to have made it?
Well, to some degree. I mean, you know, compared to the days of making $200 a month, grinding 20 hours a week, I at least have a full-time salary now, and I can support myself without figuring out how I'm going to keep the lights on while working in esports. So to that degree, yeah.
Okay. And in the book, readers obviously want to read them, but what parts are the most impactful for you?
Chapter 10, Sniff Sniff, was a big one. Really hard to write, really hard to edit, because it's just very raw and self-reflective, and even though I've told the story live on camera, it's still tough to really write that stuff out in like the graphic detail in which I remember it happening. So that's one of the first highlights of the book. And then towards the end, I think we did a pretty good job getting the tone right. I really tried hard not to make it sound like I'm the good guy and everyone else are the bad guys. I wanted to make it clear that there were a lot of group efforts, a lot of group fails, and that when you don't know all the variables, it's hard to make decisions, and that's what led to a lot of the downfall. So hopefully we got that tone right. But you know, I really respect all the people that I work with, even the people at BTS. When we had our differences, obviously I don't work for the company anymore, but we're all on good terms now, and I'm glad there's a degree of mutual respect and we can still do events together. That's really powerful.
So it's not so much that you're trying to isolate or alienate anyone, you're trying to say that esports is a collective effort, and while mistakes are made, it's not one individual's fault.
We're all on the same team for the most part. You know, we often get caught up in like the game versus game, league versus Dota, but to the outsiders, we all have so much more in common than anyone else. Like, we got to remember we're on the same team. Esports growing is good for all of us that are involved in esports.
Regardless of esports, except for Fortnite.
Yeah, you took it out of my mouth, except Fortnite.
Except Fortnite. And if someone was perhaps to pick this up for a book club, what would be a good question for them?
A good question?
For a book club.
I don't know, I've never been in a book club. What kind of questions do they ask in book clubs?
So it's normally something like, what was the author's intention when they spoke about X part of the book, or what was the motivation behind being raw and vulnerable in the Sniff Sniff chapter?
Those sound great. Yeah, those are good ones. I don't know. Sorry, I've never been in a book club. I'm a writer, not a reader, so I don't know.
Maybe you should go and be like, hey guys, I've got a great one that we can do.
Yeah, and the ebook just came out as well, available on Amazon. So it's Kindle only for now, but the ebook is available as well as the physical one. So
awesome.
Very exciting.
And what are next steps for you in writing? What is next for Zyori and his writing?
Good question. Towards the end, I just wanted it to be done. I definitely got tired of that like old university feeling, like, all right, I got to do my homework now, got to get my words in. So I'm going to take a little bit of a break and wait until something comes to me next. I mean, the Moonduck chapter is still unfolding, so who knows? Maybe one day that could be some material, but it's still active. So that makes it a little hard to write about some of the things that we did during the founding. So unknown, but only time will tell.
Yeah. Well, I hope everyone does pick it up. It is a great book. I'm only 100 pages in, but as a fan, as someone who kind of works in the industry, I think it's a great, I think you really present esports as an approachable and accessible way, and kind of take away that, I don't know, that curtain a little bit.
Well,
Let us
thank
see.
you. I'm glad to hear that. That's very nice feedback. I'm glad to hear that.
Awesome. We'll throw it back not to you. We'll just end the clip. Anyway, thanks for joining me.
Thanks a lot.
Bye.